All right, y'all, welcome back to the show. It's Anti-War Radio. Our next guest is Noam Sheizaf. Noam Sheizaf is an independent journalist and editor. He's worked for the Tel Aviv local paper Ha'ir, for Ynet, and as deputy editor for Mariv Daily News. His work is published in Haaretz, Yedioth Ahronoth, The Nation, and other publications. He currently publishes the Promised Land blog at 927mag.com. Welcome to the show, Noam. How are you doing?
Great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing great. Appreciate you joining us today. So you have a really good piece here at the 927 blog. Again, that's 927mag.com.
972.
Oh, geez, I don't know what happened to me. I'm all dyslexic this morning.
International number for the international code for Israel and the Palestinian territories.
Oh, I know what it was. I was looking at my notes where I wrote it down wrong. My apologies. I'm not that dyslexic. It's written down wrong, and I was reading that correctly. Okay, good. No, okay.
All right.
Sorry about that. It's, 972mag.com. You ought to get the other one and make sure it forwards. No, okay. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right, so the article is Settlers' Murder Investigation Turns into Collective Punishment. And this is a pretty in-depth article with a pretty detailed explanation of the situation here. So I guess, if I could do like Joe Friday, we can start with just the facts, and you can give us the background of this story, the murder of the Fogel family, and the Israeli government's reaction and their attempts to solve the crime.
Yeah. So the story began a month ago when 5 members of the Fogel family of the settlement of Itamar, that's a Jewish settlement next to the city of Nablus in the occupied West Bank, 5 members of this family were killed, were attacked while they were sleeping at their home, and they all died, leaving behind 2 small children. One of the victims of the terrible murder was a baby, and the 2 parents and 2 older kids. And the Israeli government immediately vowed to do everything to find the killers. Now, but what it did during the investigation, that it took some measures that were certainly unprecedented in such cases, and also appeared to be directed against the entire Palestinian population of the area, and not just as an attempt to solve this crime. So, in order to understand the situation, you need to realize that all the Palestinians in the West Bank are under military law, and while the Israeli settlers are under civilian law. That means that the Palestinians don't get all these rights we know for defendant during the criminal investigation, such as having their rights read, access to an attorney, or bail, or any sort of thing, habeas corpus, all those things we discuss when we talk about defenders' rights. What the army did, it invaded this small town, small community called Awarta, right next to this settlement of Itamar, and it detained hundreds of people and conducted house-to-house searches in hundreds of homes, leaving after it, broken furniture, breaking into homes, and in one morning they arrested 100 women from the village. All were questioned and interrogated, and we know for a fact that all the young males in the village were forced to give DNA samples. So altogether, it was really an unorthodox murder investigation that from the side looked like a form of collective punishment against this village. Now, a couple of days ago, there was a development, and Israel did announce that it was able to locate the 2 people responsible for the crime, and to have them under arrest. So basically, that's about it. And I use this case in my article to point to the fact that there are two sets of legal system applied by Israel in the West Bank, one for Arabs and one for Jews. And you would have never seen this form of interrogation, arresting hundreds of people, if the victim of the murder had been a Palestinian and the alleged perpetrator had been a Jew. It's only possible the other way.
All right. Now, quite a few things to review there. First of all, can you tell us what you know about those arrested now, and what's known about them? Was this a robbery or a personal vendetta, or it was political or anything like that?
It was probably a politically motivated attack. According to the information released to the Israeli media, one of the killers was there with an aim to hurt settlers. The other probably joined because he said, that's at least what he said in his interrogation, that he wanted to steal the firearms that were in the house and sell them. So from his perspective, it might have been a robbery that got wrong, but they are treated as suspects who were motivated politically, and the main suspect, the older guy, they're both very young, 18 and 19. The older guy, he's not denying that it was a politically motivated murder. They weren't a member of any known organization, political organization, so it was probably a local initiative by them.
Mm. So, best I can tell here from your description, this is a local police murder detective case, right? There's no particular reason to believe that what they did in order to so-called investigate this crime was necessary at all. It doesn't sound like. It sounds like just another murder case, really, right?
Well, you might say that
more or less.
You might say that they had better chance to catch the killers, which they say they did, and with these measures that they used. But the important thing is that if the same thing would have happened in my neighborhood or in your neighborhood, the police would have never thought of getting everyone in the street or in the next street, hundreds of people, and detaining every one of them and questioning every one of them and violating their rights and breaking into their homes, even if it would have improved the chances of having every murder case in our city solved.
Right.
So there is a question of means, and there is also a question of the rule of law in the West Bank.
Well, and I'm kind of trying to get to the motivation for the thing. As you said, it begins to look, and maybe there's some more substance to this you could refer to. But it appears that this is really collective punishment. This is just making everybody miserable as revenge for this thing happening in the name of, we're looking really hard at just trying to turn up a credible suspect here.
Well, the army obviously denies it, but from what you read in the Israeli media, there was certainly no effort to treat the people of Awarta, and we're talking about a town of 6,000 people, as innocent, or they were looked upon, the entire town, as part of a conspiracy to commit this murder. And let me just give you an example. Right after the murder occurred, some of the village land was captured by settlers, and instead of evacuating them, the army is now guarding them when they sit on the village land. So, and the army is not even denying it.
So they're using this investigation to annex more of this village.
I think, I don't know if the goal behind the investigation is to take the village land, but obviously once the settlers decided to do it, the army didn't act. So what I think is that none of us support this murder, and none of us, and we all want to find the killers and the people behind it, whatever their motives are. But even Palestinians have rights, and even people you're in the conflict with have rights. You cannot have hundreds of people be taken from their homes forced to give DNA samples. You can have house-to-house searches without a shred of evidence, just, knocking on doors, smashing furniture, looking for stuff in order to find your killers, even if you think it's the only way to do it. People have rights, even if there are Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I wonder, what's the role? Is there any such thing as the PLA local police squad there, and do they have any role whatsoever in this? Or
that's the thing. We all under the impression that the Palestinians are independent you always hear about the Palestinian Authority, right? But at the end of the day, if Israel wants to conduct such a search in a certain place, it can always do so, because the ultimate authority in the West Bank is still the Israeli occupation. In this particular village, the PA doesn't even have this kind of power where it has, in the big cities, Ramallah or Nablus or Hebron, where it can actually conduct it has its own police force and everything. Over in a place like Awarta, the place we're talking about, which has 6,000 people in it, the security is still, Israeli security forces still have full authority. There's basically no one to defend these people's rights, and it's been the situation on the ground for 40-something years. And it's just getting worse. And this example from Awarta is one of the worst examples of recent years of the total disrespect for the rule of law in this occupation and the undemocratic way which Palestinians are handled under the occupation in the West Bank. And this is the stuff that bothered us and led me to writing this piece, because no one questions the need to find the killers, the people who did this murder, and no one supports the murder. But still, people have rights. Even the murder defendants of suspects have rights, and certainly an entire town have rights.
Well, gosh, and it shouldn't be too hard to, for Americans to put themselves in that situation. If we lived under permanent martial law for decades, where the army could come in and force everyone in, a certain part of a town or a certain town to go out into the street and give up DNA.
Someone on the other street did something terrible, then everyone in your town, we're talking 6,000 people, will be under this kind, there were 5 days of curfew, full curfew on this town. So, and people can break into your homes, and you have no Miranda, and you can't call an attorney, and you're forced to give DNA samples without even being able to consult everyone, and it's been done to hundreds of people. Even if you end up finding the people who did it, is this the way you want your society to function? Is this a democracy? That's the question we're asking.
Well, you mentioned the use of dogs by the police going into people's homes. I wonder, are those German Shepherds?
I don't know, because this part of the thing that for a long time the media wasn't allowed into the village. So we only know from reports of residents there on the use of dogs, which they gave testimonies to human rights organizations who were able to access the village of Awarta after those searches and after the days of curfew. So we don't know which dogs they used.
Mm-hmm. And you say that a lot of the Palestinians, or at least a few, several is your word here, claim that they were just simply robbed by the Israeli army when it broke into their house.
Some of them they were missing stuff when the soldiers left. Now, it's not surprising. You send thousands of soldiers. People have no legal defense, and I guess if people would send the entire police force of a town, and you can't call your attorney, and you don't need a warrant to enter someone's home and to conduct a search. So you in every city, when you do something, you end up with a few cases of looting and of stealing. So I guess this was the case there as well. Mm-hmm. This is the problem, when people don't have rights, and when you don't aggressively defend those rights, because you think that you should do anything because some crime occurred and someone is a suspect. When you don't defend those rights, you end up with looting, with robbing, with damage to property, with hurting people who have nothing to do with the crime. So, and this is the case under this occupation, under military law for 44 years. That's how the Palestinians live.
Mm-hmm. Now, you know what I wonder is how can the population of Israel continue this way? I mean, I know that there are right-wing nationalists and right-wing religious people who are hell-bent on settling, taking over the West Bank ultimately and that kind of thing. But what about everybody else? This is madness. Well, martial law for 4 decades.
I know from American history that it takes a lot of time to convince a population about the stuff that its own army does, or about the stuff that is done in the name of this country. It can take a really long time for people to make up their mind. And in Israel, Israel is in a tough spot right now. The public is very scared from security threats, and people would rather just not know, I guess. So it's the sad banality of life that people would rather not know what is done in their name.
Well, I saw a poll a long time ago that said, this is when Sharon was still running things. In fact, you know what? This may have been back when Netanyahu was the prime minister the first time. And it was a poll of Israelis that said that they would be totally for the land for peace and a Palestinian state and a permanent deal, peace treaty and normalized relations with all the neighbors and whatever. But unless the United States is willing to put the pressure on the Israeli government to force that to happen, they, instead go ahead and prefer somebody like Netanyahu or Ariel Sharon, who at least is going to protect them. As long as they're picking a fight, they want good security.
I think you're on the money there. You're touching the heart of the matter. Israelis will be willing to end the occupation, but right now they have no incentive to do that. They got a policy which is supported in a way by the United States, because the United States doesn't do anything to end the occupation. Because the United States actually supports, with military support, this occupation. So my feeling is that if Israelis would face a real choice, but I'm talking about a real choice, they will decide to end the occupation. That's the feeling I get, and that's the sense I get from the people around me, and from polls, as you mentioned. But I don't think that anybody really, especially not Washington, had made Israel face this choice. Not until now.
Yeah, well, and it's even worse in Gaza. I guess they don't have the military occupation. They just have bombs falling out of the sky all the time.
Mm-hmm. That's a different issue, yeah. But you're right. The question is what would happen even after a sort of a limited withdrawal, and do we work to stabilize the situation? But with the West Bank and with people like the village of Awarta, we're not even there yet, because nobody is trying to force Israel out of these places.
All right, well, I'm sorry, we're over time, and we have to leave it there, but I really appreciate your time on the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody, that is Noam Sheizaf, 972mag.com.